Welcome, travelers. I'm Josh.
And I'm Lee Wanika, and this is Tabletop Journeys, where we will be your not-so-humble guides on the quest for RPG adventures.
All right. Welcome, everybody, back to Tabletop Journeys. We're going to be continuing our deep dive into the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. As you can see down the bottom, we are beginning with Chapter 6, the Cosmology chapter. Before we get into that, Mr. Michael Ross, Mr. Lee Wanika Miller, good evening, gentlemen. Am I the only one that does not have the limited edition book cover? That's a sad state of affairs.
You are.
So, how the hell are you guys today? Like, what's going on? How are you doing?
I am having an awesome week. This weekend has been incredible. I had my birthday. I got loaded with geekery, gifts from friends and family, and hellos and well wishes. I could not be happier. Even had a mystery gift show up from some crazy fool in Maine. Totally unbeknownst to me. It just amazing. I am and they were cool, really cool little gifts. So
someday, as an aside, awesome. we should share the cloak and dagger that went into bringing you that gift. But yeah, that's
yeah. There was some skullduggery involved.
So, how about you, Michael? How are you doing, sir?
So I should have went first because I can't follow that. I've been getting over a cold. I've been kind of under the weather.
Yeah.
I'm in southeastern Kentucky, so we kind of got just on the outskirts of that big storm. I'm sure it's been all over the news.
Yep.
So we didn't get a lot of snow, but we did get ice. So we were supposed to return to school Monday after our 2-week holiday break, and we've not been back yet. We're still 50-50 on whether or not going to go tomorrow.
Wow.
So I've been working a lot of puzzles,
yep.
Trying to keep the house clean for the wife. And then I did get a game to the table tonight. We are playing Bomb Busters.
Oh, okay.
Which is a not hidden information, but it's like a information social deduction sort of. I'm describing it terribly. Basically, you're trying to diffuse a bomb, but you can't share information about what you have. It's like a hidden information sort of thing. It's hard to explain, but it's a lot of fun. So we got that to the table tonight with the family, had a good time, and looking forward to watching the next Skeleton Crew episode, which came out like 37 minutes ago or 27 minutes ago.
Nice. Well, we'll make sure and keep this recording nice and snappy for you so you can get to that. So I am. Today is actually my last day here in Maine because my wife and our dog and our 2-year-old, we're getting ready to go on vacation for the next 2 weeks. And we are going into the teeth of the beast, as it were. We're driving to like Pennsylvania. We're driving into the Poconos. So, we were very curiously watching how that storm developed, like in upstate New York and stuff like that. Kind of right in the area that we'll be driving through tomorrow. And, so it's like, okay, well, the longer that we wait to leave, the better our weather is going to be. So, we're not going to be in any hurry to get out the door tomorrow. So, except that we both hate driving in the dark. So there's that too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Without that being said, let's dive into the Cosmology chapter in the DMG. So we've talked about the previous 5 chapters already. This is a very interesting chapter for me in terms of why it's in the book.
I feel like we might be on the same page.
Yeah.
Leo Nika, you want to go first on this one, bud?
Yeah,
I may be an outlier, but I have interesting opinions, so we'll see how that comes out. So I'll jump in. I think my overview is I think it was a solid block of information, very geared towards here's how cosmology works in canon and can work in your game. And I'll have some picky points and some things that I want to point out that I think really highlight that latter part of that. Like, here's how you can have it work. I think better than they've done in other chapters and certainly other publications, they did a really good job of saying, here's what we have for you to use, but you don't have to use it.
Yeah.
And I really loved that piece of advice. I think that leans into some of the things that, Michael, you had mentioned in earlier chapters. Like, this may not be how I do it or how I would want it at my table. I wish they had given us more in the vein of here's an option. And while they didn't use that phrase directly, I think they did a much better job of giving that type of description. And because of that, what they have here, I think works really well. Lots of idea fuel, lots of good canon information, but not so deep that it was too much overall, though I did find myself wanting to skip the pieces that I already knew very well. I didn't, but I wanted to, because I just really wanted to see, did they cover it? And spoiler alert, Planescape and Spelljammer, I think, were covered better here than they were covered in their 3-piece box sets.
I think that is a argument that you will find no argument with. Like the Spelljammer box set was not particularly good. Like it was, I'm not gonna. There's
in both cases, I love. In both cases, I love those bestiaries. The adventures, maybe ish, not really, but. Yeah. As far as the info I would need to run or want to run a Spelljammer or a Planescape campaign, this is the book to get.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting to me about this chapter. I think my notes on it were basically like, it's great information. I'm just not sure that it belongs here. And the reason is because if I'm looking at this book, and I recognize that this book is not the pinnacle of everything that needs to or should be in my game. When we looked at the earlier chapters, like, oh man, this is it's doing a lot of great things for people that have never done this before. It could go a little bit deeper. It could go a little bit some different directions, but it's really great beginner information. And then they dump this gigantic chapter on the cosmology, kind of tying in 50 years of history into one very cliff notey chapter. And I wonder how this chapter, for example, fits with other chapters that require you not to be skipping across the multitude of planes, that may require you to, or you may be benefited by being a little closer to home, fairly like every 7 days or so, so I wonder how that's going to work. So I think that kind of like this and the next chapter, those 3 chapters for me are kind of like, here are 3 things that you could do, but you probably can't do all 3 of them in the same game. So,
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I will say, to start very positive, the art in this chapter is some of the most evocative in the book.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely inspirational to be like, oh, that's cool.
Oh,
that's
brilliant.
Cool. That's cool. Love the art. Yeah. Here's my kind of issue with this, that I think that this is like 39 pages. This is a healthy chunk of this overall book, right?
Yeah.
90% of this book is useless for like 90% of the people who are going to run games.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, like, there are exceptions. I'm like, maybe even 80%, but I think like the Shadowfell and the Feywild are the 2 realms that will get used probably by most people who want to do some multiple planar stuff. Most campaigns don't go to 20th level. Most of them are not going to get high enough that you're going to start plane hopping around unless you just want to do like a one-off high level thing.
Right.
So it's cool information, but I think it's actually too robust for this book. And there should be another book, and I'm sure there will be another book, like of the planes that you can go seek out if you're like, oh, that is cool. So I don't have any problem with the information other than it's 40 pages roughly of stuff that I think most people are not going to use.
And probably could have been 400 to be.
Yeah, exactly. This could be in its own book. Again, it probably should be. Even like the Shadowfell probably should be its own book. The Feywild will probably be its own book. I'm sure there's already stuff on DM's Guild and Drive Through.
Sure.
But I don't think it's enough information to actually give someone what they need to run a plane hopping adventure, but it's more robust than it needs to be if it's not going to serve that purpose. So it's kind of like this weird middle ground. It's too much for what it is, and it's not enough for what it needs to be. So it's fine. I'm glad it's here, but I don't know that it's really going to get a lot of use out of this book if you're a brand new DM. If this is your first time, this is your book you're looking at, this is not enough to run with, but it's a lot. Like even Lee Winicki, like you were kind of wanting to skip around. If no one's ever read any of this before, this is a lot. Like, what do you mean? There's 19 different sub-realms in every realm. Like, what? No. Look at the pretty pictures and go, oh, okay, fire realm. And then go write an adventure where they go to the fire realm and then they all die because they're fire realm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying, but I think this will get more use in a different kind of way. You're right. This is not what you need to run a game. This is not what you need to run a campaign in that plane hops or whatever. But what it does give you enough is if you're reading the Vecna book, or if you're running the Vecna adventure, which has that starter adventure at a low level, and then you've got the campaign, the Vecna campaign, and it's instructing you, weave in other things in between, and maybe throw in another adventure in a given area, a given plane. The Vecna book doesn't give you this information. So if you're in any boxed adventure that touches on any of these areas, now this is enough to fill that in to run a single adventure because you happen to already be there by way of some other book. So you're right. Nobody's going to use all of this in any one campaign. But almost every published campaign touches one of these things. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the value comes in. This is your touch point as a GM who picked up Princes of the Apocalypse and wants to run it. This is your touch point if you pick up Storm King's Thunder and you want to run it. This is your adventure if you picked up Wild by the Witchlight and you want to run it. Candle Keep and you want to run it. Infinite Staircase and you want to run it. Any of these things, this is your touch point. And they did a good job of talking about how to cross in between planes, the value of the portals, those things. So if you've got players and say, hey, look, I want to go to Kryn, now as a GM, you can flip right to chapter 6, find the information you need for a portal that makes sense, and make that scene shine.
Yeah.
Even though that has nothing to do with your campaign as a whole, but you can make your individual scenes shine. That's what I really like about this chapter, is it's giving you little tools to make other things, the main things you're doing, better.
Yeah. You know, your point about the Vecna adventure is actually really well taken, because you and I have talked a lot, both kind of on air and off air, about the Vecna adventure and the things that could be done with that. And, you know, spoiler, I don't think any of my players listen anyway, but spoiler alert, when we get to the Vecna part of the game that I'm running in person, I'm basically not running any of the adventures the way that the Vecna book presents them. They're all going to be different in some way. Some of them are going to get thrown out altogether. Like the Eberron adventure is not going to be the Eberron adventure and all that sort of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting point, that if you've got the Eberron adventure is going to be your adventure, Lee Winnie. Like it's going to be
even better.
It's going to be excellent. Yeah. So I mean, that's
because that's a really good adventure.
Yeah. Don't weep. Like it's going to be there, you know. But so that's a really, really good point, that like if someone's reading the Vecna book, for example, and saying, I feel like I could do something different, but I just don't know enough. Let me go read up on the Feywild. I guess it's good for that, but why would you pick this book instead of like the Feywild Companion, or like Michael said, like go to DM's Guild and pick up any number of Feywild books?
And I will tell you why. Because they are planting their flag from and this is a business, I'm being very cynical. They are planting their flag on names, places, locations, and story concepts that require third-party people to publish on DM's Guild versus elsewhere every one of these things. That's point one. That's my most cynical. This is a business decision. They have said, we own this. Because if you notice, almost no mechanics in this entire chapter. Yeah. That means this entire chapter is now IP. If it wasn't before, it absolutely is as of today. So that's the main reason why it's here. And we also know that when they do these big published adventures, oddly, players don't tend to get them. But I have heard musings that, anecdotally at least, and certainly by what we're hearing, players will buy the DMG because of the optional rules, even though it's a DMG. Therefore, now the info is there. And if you're a player who wants to play something different than the farmer who became a champion fighter, and you're looking, I want to come from someplace cool, guess what? Again, this chapter gives you something cool. You want to play Feylost as a background, this gives you stuff that's cool. You want to link your character to some far off place, a Fey Wanderer or any of these other types of things. And I keep leaning on Fey because it's one of my favorites, not because it's the only option, but this gives you that. You heard all the great things about Quest from the Infinite Staircase, and you heard all the great things about the Radiant Citadel, a favorite book of mine, right? I love those adventures. I love those concepts. I think this gives you a good link in. So business, cynical, planting a flag. Narratively and storytelling, it's a good anchor for people other than just a GM. I think it is there to be part of the quote unquote toolbox, not to be the whole thing. And I don't think this stuff sells in a book on its own as well.
Yeah, that could be fair. We're going to ignore that little gesticulation that you did there, Michael, about Radiant Citadel.
That's for another day.
We're going to scrape over that there for now. So. All right. So what else did you want to talk about in this chapter? I mean, again, it's kind of like, I think this chapter is kind of exactly what it says it is. It's just a description of the various planes. A page or so for each one. No single one kind of stood out to me as like, oh, this is a fantastic representation of the Nine Hells, or this is a fantastic representation of Shadowfell, or anything like that. It's all very. It's not cursory. It's maybe like a step above cursory, but it's definitely not meaty.
So. Interestingly enough, I think this could have gone into the lore glossary as a subchapter within the lore glossary, and I think we would have spoken about it better. We would have probably said, the lore glossary was great, has all these good things, but that cosmology chapter, and honestly, I know it's very deep and very heavy, but if they had even taken it wholesale, just moved it within, subheading it, we would have said the cosmology section stood out in the lore glossary as being really great info for all the reasons we previously mentioned, and the artwork was amazing. The Demon Web was incredible. One of the best pieces of art in the entire book is in this chapter, as far as I'm concerned. I have a whole adventure building in my head just by looking at that picture. That's how good it was. But I think because they chose to make it a separate chapter, and we have to talk about it separately, it cheapens it, if that's the right word, lessens it in some degree. Whereas if it was part of the lore glossary, because this is all this is, it's a chapter of lore about the planes. I think it was kind of mistitled and should have been a part of the other thing. But I really liked the discussion about alternate ways to configure your cosmology. It was very short. It wasn't deep, but I thought it was very meaningful and poignant to me. Maybe lost on the newest of GMs, but I do think even the newest of GMs would see you don't have to do it this way. And I think that's a very important point to make in this chapter.
I will just say I actually really agree with that statement, that if it had been framed differently as like put in the Garcia of lore, I would feel very differently about it. But because it's here, it's its own chapter, it makes me feel like it's required reading. Like none of this is required, but it feels like it is. But if this was just like, this is just more lore, and there had been like a shorter chapter about plane hopping, like, hey, we'll talk about the planes later, but these are the different ways people have experienced it. Maybe even like a short sample adventure of like, you're in the prime material plane, this happens, and then which plane do you go to? You get to choose, but it's like the setup, like the first session of a campaign starter to also again reiterate those other things. I'm saying we need more examples. I would have liked that better, but I do agree. If you just put it in the lore section, I would be like, this is great. And the picture and the art's still great. So
I think that's really, well done. Having it in the middle of the book makes it stand out, and maybe this one shouldn't stand out. So, all right. I don't know. Any other profound insights from you guys?
I'm just glad Eberron gets a mention.
I know, right? Yeah, finally. A little bit of love.
The only thing I was going to say other than that, and Michael stole my thunder very early, was the artwork. I love the artwork in this section.
Good. It's so good.
Yeah, the artwork in this book, there are some things that we talked about earlier that were really kiddie-like and not to our liking or our sensibilities, but the art of the planes was great. The Abyss and the Nine Hells picture was another one that was so good.
Even just the picture of the Lady of Pain right at the very beginning of the chapter, just like really kind of like, because you see that face is so iconic, and so it. But to see her in kind of all of her dread glory there, it's like, standing looming over frightened populace. Like, oh no. This is not just a weird woman in a metal mask. Like, this is actually like a for real problem. This is not going to be good. I feel like this chapter could have done with some more chibi art. I think that it lacked that a little bit. No, I'm totally joking. I totally agree with you. So, totally agree.
Great art. Good info, could have been presented better.
Yeah.
I don't consider this a detriment to the quality of the book, and I think it is something that I will be using. It gave me lots of good idea fuel, and so I can see myself certainly on a creative writing or preparing an adventure for players and or future publication, leaning back on this to recapture briefly what's the focus, what's the theme of this area, and does it fit my story? Yes, let's use this one this time. Just different things like that, and I think that's useful for a host of reasons.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to close up here talking about the Cosmology chapter. We will be back in just a moment talking about chapter 7, the treasure chapter. So we'll see you over on that side there.
Let's get them goodies. Good night, all.